Have you ever wanted to move so fast that you make speed look slow? Well, with F-Zero, a futuristic racing game, you can have that and more. When F-Zero came out, it was a game of firsts. It was part of the first set of games released on the Super Nintendo. It was the first game in the F-Zero series, but probably most important, it is credited with being the first game to utilize the SNES's new graphic mode, Mode 7, to create its pseudo 3D environments, which still look decent, even by today's standards. Inspired by the Formula 1 or F1 races in our world, this game came packed with unique physics, bright colored art, and anti-gravity racing machines that redefine the concept of what a racing game could be. Our story begins in the year 2560, in the short comic found in the actual manual of the game. The tale depicts four main characters, beginning with the daring space mercenary, Captain Falcon, as he picks up bounties on criminals. Along the way, Falcon bumps into Samurai Goro, who he rubs the wrong way by, according to Goro, stealing his bounty. We also get introduced to Dr. Stewart and Pico, a strange alien, near the start of an F-Zero race. Dr. Stewart is sort of played up as this handsome racer who's in it to impress the ladies or something, but I love how Pico is just described as this wild running killer. I suppose this could just be his racing title, but the way I read it was that he was actually some sort of killer that people tolerate running free because they enjoy watching him race or something. Either way, this guy is crazy. He literally describes himself as experiencing ecstasy when his opponent's hover cars are wrecked and burning. The comic ends with all the cars lined up in preparation for the big race. And speaking of comic, if you didn't have the instruction manual, like me as a kid, you'd be tough-pressed to know that F-Zero had any sort of plot whatsoever, let alone characters, since the game makes no reference to any of them, except a vague mention of some guy called Captain Falcon when you beat the game on Master Mode. I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I only even discovered that this comic exists recently. Anyway, in later games and media, it would be developed that the races were held by wealthy ex-space merchants looking to create some kind of entertainment while making money on the side, but for the most part, F-Zero doesn't seem to include much in the way of that tale. It's just a game about racing. In the air. On racetracks that float, thousands of feet in the sky. I did mention that, didn't I? Once you finally hop into the game, you'll find that F-Zero doesn't waste any of your time. Ignoring records and practice mode, selecting Grand Prix immediately kicks you into the car and track selection screen, which then quickly puts your rookie butt on the track. This makes a great pick up and go sort of game structure, but creates a few subtle problems that we'll get into much later. But for now, let's focus on the race and the cars. The races are selected by way of 3 different leagues that go in order of Knight, Queen, and King League, with each one being more difficult than the last. Each of the leagues contain 5 races for a total of 15 tracks at 9 different planets. While the lore of these planets would be built up over the course of the F-Zero franchise, today we can apply what we know of these planets to the original F-Zero game. Of the more colonized planets, we find Port Town, a bustling trade city, Whiteland, which is a tourist attraction where it's constantly snowing, Red Canyon, where space pirates tend to hang out, and the famous Mute City, which you visit during the day, dusk, and night. Of the less populated or civil planets, we find Big Blue, the water planet, Deathwind, a war-torn planet with powerful windstorms, Sand Ocean, a desolate desert planet, Silence, a planet devoid of any sound or life whatsoever, and lastly Firefield, an old mining planet that is now covered in lava. While each location is unique on its own, some stand out more than others for reasons pleasant to the player and not. Your first visit to Whiteland is kind of fun, as it is characterized by a lot of jumps. But on your second visit, there is a massive jump that if you don't have enough speed to clear, you can kiss your car goodbye. I find Silence to actually be a pleasant track overall. It has purple tones and soothing music, but racing it can be tricky as its track is characterized by a lot of odd geometric turns. And then of course there's Firefield, which is mostly just characterized by making you hate your life. While maybe not as difficult from a technical standpoint as Firefield, the most infamous track for me are always the Deathwind tracks. The fun part of these tracks is that they are populated with a lot of speed boosts that really let the player feel like they are flying, but missing just one speed boost on the harder settings could mean the loss of first place or even the loss of the entire race itself, depending on which car you're using. Add to that the sharp turns on Deathwind 2, and you're bound to have some pretty violent accidents. It gets even worse though when you consider that the tracks are also characterized by an extremely frustrating wind that blows the racer in one direction or another, making it really difficult to race. This can actually be confusing to the player as there is really no indicator in the game that this is what's happening. If you didn't put the title Death Wind and the fact that you have to drive at an angle to go straight, you might not really understand what's going on. And even when you do, it's not always easy to overcorrect a hover car going over 400 kilometers per hour. The wind is just one of many hazards you'll face in the F-Zero universe, though. There's anti-gravity walls, line magnets, jump magnets, off-road sections, anti-traction magnets, or what we in the lore incorrect world like to call ice, mines, and other racers that are too stupid to realize their car is about to blow up. There are a few good things on the track too, like the pit stop that heals your power, boosts that rocket you forward, and ramps that send you into the air. If you're ramping, make sure you hold down on the D-pad to gain some extra air, and keep it held down when hitting the track so you obtain a soft landing. Otherwise you'll have a hard landing and you'll lose all that extra speed you gained from the jump. As for the hover cars, there's 4. There's the Blue Falcon, the Golden Fox, the Wild Goose, and the Fire Stingray, which belong to Captain Falcon, Dr. Stewart, Pico, and Samurai Goro respectively. At a glance, as the chart would suggest, the cars are largely defined by their max speed and acceleration. The Golden Fox has the best acceleration in the game, followed by the Blue Falcon, then the Wild Goose, and lastly the Fire Stingray. Considering top speed, the list is reversed. The Fire Stingray has the highest top speed, and down the line the Golden Fox has the lowest. But these are basic racing mechanics standard to almost every racing game. What else is there? Well, while it may be a bit confusing, the power stat has nothing to do with engine power, but is actually the car's health, and in this game the more health the better. Last, there is weight, which determines whether you can take a hit and keep going, or whether you're a bounce house. I'm looking at your car, Dr. Stewart. That wraps it up for the listed stats, but there are other hidden stats that belong to each car. Each car loses a certain amount of speed once its turn becomes too sharp while using the left and right buttons of the D-pad. The lighter the car, the faster the speed loss. In the case of the Fire Stingray, it's actually impossible for it to lose speed by turning normally, as it simply cannot make the turn sharp enough to cause the speed loss. Since there is no analog stick on the SNES controller, this actually turns out to be more of a bonus than anything else, as it means you can't accidentally cause yourself to lose speed on a turn, unless you're like crashing into a wall, or you're doing a power turn with the L and R keys. When it comes to off-roading, heavy cars are more resistant to hazards that manipulate the car's position, such as wind and magnets, etc., when compared to lighter cars. Lastly, each car has a hidden boost stat that determines the strength and length of any boost, such as the boosts found on the track, or any of the 4 usable super boosts that you get for each lap of the track that you complete. Once again, the heavier cars reap the better end of this statistic, as their boost not only reaches a higher top speed, but also lasts longer. Okay, I know that's a lot to take in all at once, but all this knowledge allows us to crown one car statistically better than all the others. If you haven't guessed it by now, it's the Fire Stingray. Heavy cars are definitely favored in this game. Higher max speed, health, weight, boost, ability to resist terrain hazards, and specifically the Stingray's ability to turn without a loss of speed far outweighs the penalty to acceleration and handling on turns. It's not that you can't use the other cars. I managed to win on the hardest setting with each car in at least one of the leagues, but it's pretty clear that the raw stats from the Stingray, and even the Wild Goose to an extent, give it the ability to just plow through the opposition much easier than the other cars, especially once you get the power turning technique down, as it mitigates the poor turning penalty. When it comes to be your turn to race your F-Zero machine, if you want to win, just remember the rules of the road. If you're driving and you see a car in trouble, make sure to pull over at least one lane for safety's sake. You don't want his accident to become your accident, do you? Second, remember who has the right of way. If you are in a light compact and you see a heavy roller in front of you, remember, don't be rude. Sure, it might feel good to ram right into him, but he's bigger than you, and you'll likely be the one to suffer. Plus, he'll probably stiff you on his insurance information, leaving you to pay for the damages. On the idea of pay, remember that gas isn't free, and you want to be as cost effective with your mileage as possible. Cut every corner you can. Every corner. If that means you're using a ramp to cut across large portions of the track, so be it. The jump in the air is brief, and I'm sure the kids in the back seat didn't want their lunches in their stomachs anyway. Finally, remember, if you get into an accident and you ram into someone, you're at fault, even if they slammed on the brakes at the last second for no reason. That's why if collision becomes unavoidable, you always want to be the one in the front. Not only will you get a small speed boost and slow down the car that ran into you, when it comes to courtrooms and insurance cases, you'll always be in the clear. Joking aside, while taking a cruise on the various planets of the game, you'll pick up the game's expressive aesthetics very quickly. As far as racing games go, this game's visuals throw realism out the window, and instead choose a color scheme that causes the cars and the environment to pop up in bright and appealing colors. The backgrounds themselves are fun to look at and are reasonably detailed. I remember as a child I would look out at the endless span that was Deathwind and think how scary the big skull in the background was. Of course, when I say child, I'm talking like 3 years old, so cut me a bit of slack. Most powerful to me, though, is the game's funky and catchy music, featuring over 10 unique songs. As far as I know, most of them have appeared in some form or another in future games, and they are largely unchanged. Seriously, load up Super Smash Bros. 4 and listen to Big Blue. Its tune is almost verbatim to the original. I think that speaks for itself at how fantastic these songs were composed. So at this point you may be thinking, Chezni, what in the name of Mute City is up with all the track details and the car physics? What about the actual game? Well, here's the thing. That is the actual game. Well, okay, there's a bit more to it than that, but not much. As stated before, choosing a league puts you into a set of 5 races, with 5 laps at each race. Each lap you complete must be finished at a place that is higher than the last lap. It starts out at a generous 15 and ends at a pretty strict 3. If at any point you do not finish a lap at the required rank, you rank out. You lose a life, and you start the race over. Lives can be earned within a finite realm of score, but once you run out, you lose the entire league and you have to start over. And that's mostly it. Essentially, as long as you finish every race within the top 3, the game treats you as if you've won. It makes no distinction between a player who's finished all 5 tracks in 3rd, or all 5 tracks in 1st. As far as the game is concerned, you're just the victor either way. I've never seen a racing game that did this. Every other one that I've played demands perfection, and it demands that you are first place in every race. On the other hand, this is actually kind of nice and realistic mechanic. Why should you always have to be number 1 every time? I mean, in life, you're definitely not always going to be perfect in everything you do, so why do so many of our games demand it? F-Zero certainly doesn't. On a bit of a more logical standpoint, not being required to obtain first place in every track in all the leagues sort of leaves little work for you to do in the game. There's only one obtainable achievement in the game, and that is beating every league on the Expert difficulty, which then unlocks the Master difficulty. After that, there's not much else to work for. The challenge that Master Mode presents is fun, and finishing it gets you a nifty little overhead cutscene of your car and a thank you from Captain Falcon and his team, but after that, the game just keeps going, same as it ever has. It makes no recognition that you've beaten Master Mode or not. I know it sounds petty, but I sort of wish that there was a trophy or a symbol of each car that you've beaten Master Mode with next to the leagues once you've finished them or something. I mean, it wouldn't take much, but it would just be something that you can have to show your accomplishment. A similar symbol of achievement could also be warranted if you had beaten the cup obtaining first place in every race. Maybe the car symbol would turn gold or something, I don't know. But maybe that's a problem with me, right? As games have developed over the last 25 years, there have been an uprising in obtaining petty achievements and creating games that announce to the player every single award they get. Maybe that's the beauty of F-Zero. You're allowed to commit as much or as little time to it as you want. In this way, getting first place in every track is an achievement you can keep for yourself. You don't need the game to tell you that getting first in every track is a good thing. You're left to come to that conclusion on your own. So while the actual game itself might lack a motivating structure to keep on playing it, it also comes across as a great pick up and play game that you can treat as serious or as casual as you want. Well, as the power tank of this review begins to run empty, I can end on these remarks concerning F-Zero. It is certainly a well-designed, fast-paced, and fun game that is worth picking up and playing around with from time to time. What it lacks in story or game structure, it more than makes up for in content, mechanics, and just raw speed of the races. So on behalf of the Captain Chezni team, this is SNES Legacy, wishing you a great day, and signing off.